house pricings, the listings that they're trying to sell them for aren't going for enough. And real estate agents only have a certain amount of marketing budget, and if the house isn't worth enough, they're not going to spend very much on a video to promote that. So I always try and find houses that are at least in the millions of dollars, $5 to $10 million listings. This one's only $1 million listing, so it's one of the smaller ones I've done, but again, it's because it's for a friend of mine. Now, before every real estate video, I like to ask my client up front, what are the main features you want to make sure I capture? I always tell them I'm going to film everything anyway, but I need to know up front, is there anything specific you want me to feature? And in this case, he said, yeah, make sure that you capture the stream out there, get a shot going up the road up here. So always make sure you ask the client what they're looking for, what the selling points of the house are, and that way you make sure you capture everything. Now, as far as camera settings go, I honestly mix it up as I go. Each room is going to be different lighting, different color temperatures. So I'll give you a little behind the scenes look at changing from room to room, color temperatures. I personally like to shoot everything at 60 frames per second and then slow it down to 24 in post, and that gives it a nice super slow, buttery look to the footage. That's just my personal preference. If it's too low of light, I will go down to 24 frames and then just move a little bit slower to try and match the rest of the footage. But 60 frames is my preference. As far as gear goes, we have our 1DX Mark II. Lens is the Liowa 12mm 2.8, zero distortion. What that means basically is there's no curving on the outside. So basically when you're passing by straight lines, they're not going to be curved like a fisheye, but they're going to be straight lines. So that's what the zero distortion means, and we'll show some of those shots so you can see what it does, especially in very tight spaces. And with real estate videos, you want to try and make the rooms look as big as possible because it's easier to sell the house when you're making the house look bigger than it really is. So that's why I use wide angle lenses. Now, normally I'd use a 16 to 35 Canon lens, but the 1DX Mark II has a 1.35 crop factor when you're shooting in 4K. So to match that 16mm effect on the full frame, I have a 12mm times 1.35 equals about 16mm. So it gives me that awesome 16mm wide look that I like. Other things that I like shooting with the Liowa lens is like landscapes or, you know, action type stuff where I'm really tight in the action. So wide angles are super fun for me to use. Now, the reason I chose this lens over some of its competitors like the Sigma 12 to 24 or the Canon 11 to 24 is because this is a 2.8 lens, which means it's going to do a lot better in low light versus some of those other ones are 4.0 aperture. And a lot of real estate, especially in basements, you're going to have low light scenarios, so you're going to have a super grainy image unless you have a 2.8 lens. So that's why I've chosen this lens over some of its competitors. Another reason is this one's only $900 versus the Sigma's about twice as much at $1,600, and the Canon 11 to 24 is about 3 times as